It started how these things usually start: a conversation in a public plaza, a passing comment about faith, a polite correction, and soon a small crowd had gathered. A man found himself defending his belief, a conviction that lived more in his chest than in his mouth. He wasn't uneducated, but his words couldn't convince anyone. His main opponent, a sharp and patient woman, had a gift for restatement. She'd repeat his words back to him, gently, making them sound naive. "What you are describing," she said, "is belief, and you are entitled to it. But you keep presenting it as though it were something more than that." "It is more than that," the believer insisted. "In what way?" "Because it is true." A few people smiled. Not cruelly, just knowingly. "Every person who holds a belief thinks it is true," she replied. "That is what belief means. It does not mean you are correct." The believer fell silent, the crowd's verdict quietly solidifying. A man beside her added, "The claims of Christ are not historical claims. They are religious claims. By definition, they are not subject to verification." "But he rose from the dead," the believer said, the words sounding childish even to his own ears. "You believe he rose from the dead," the woman said softly. "Surely you can see the difference between believing something happened and demonstrating that it happened." He looked around at the faces, sympathetic, but settled. He wasn't being attacked, he was being managed. He tried again. "The prophecies were written by people who believed." The man interjected, "Belief confirming belief is not evidence. It is a circle." The believer went quiet. His conviction hadn't moved, but his ability to express it was gone. He stood there, helpless, knowing something he couldn't prove. The crowd, sensing a conclusion, began to drift. No one noticed the man standing near the fountain. He'd been listening for a while, with the stillness of someone waiting for a specific sound. And then he heard it. He stepped forward. "Excuse me," he said. The woman turned. "I couldn't help hearing," the stranger said. "I would like to ask the group a few questions, if you are willing." She studied his calm manner and nodded. "You have established that religious claims are matters of belief, not truth. Is that the consensus here?" "It is the consensus of modern scholarship," the man beside her affirmed. "Good," the stranger said. "I want to make sure I am standing on your ground, not mine." He paused. "Let me ask something about truth and belief in general. Can belief shut the door that truth opens?" "No," the woman answered immediately. "If something is true, believing otherwise doesn't make it untrue." "Can belief open the door that truth shuts?" "No." "Same principle. Can truth shut the door that belief opens?" "Yes. That is precisely what truth does. It corrects false belief. And can truth open the door that belief shuts?" "Yes," she said, a note of impatience in her voice. "One more," the stranger said. "Is there anything other than truth that can open so that nothing can shut it, and shut so that nothing can open it?" The woman paused. "No," she said. "By definition, only truth has that property." "And you are all in agreement on this?" he asked. There were firm nods all around. This was their ground. "Thank you," the stranger said. He was quiet for a moment, then spoke. "These are the words of him who is holy and true, who holds the key of David. What he opens no one can shut, and what he shuts no one can open." Silence. "What is that?" someone asked. A young man with a phone looked up. "It is there," he said. Revelation 3:27. Word for word. A ripple went through the group. The stranger looked at the woman. "The passage describes someone who opens and no one can shut, and shuts and no one can open. You have all just told me, unanimously, that only truth has this property. So is this passage describing belief, or is it describing truth?" The silence that followed was different. It was the silence of people hearing their own words played back in an unexpected key. The man beside her spoke first. "You are taking a poetic religious text and mapping it onto a logical framework. That is a category error." "I used no framework of my own," the stranger replied. "I asked what truth does. You answered. I then read you the passage." The passage describes what you described. I only pointed to the correspondence. He continued, if we try to interpret the passage as describing belief, does that hold by your own principles? No, someone said quietly. Belief can always be overridden by truth. We just said that. So, if we interpret it as belief, the passage is incoherent, the stranger said. But if we interpret it as truth, the passage is perfectly coherent. It describes exactly what you say truth does. There is only one correct reading, and it is not belief. The fountain was the only sound. The woman's face was still, but her mind was working. Even so, she said carefully, this is a coincidence. The words happen to line up. It doesn't mean the author intended it. An accident, the stranger said, if you want to put it that way. Yes, that is a fair response, the stranger said. So let us test it fairly. If this is an accident, there is a limit to how many times it can repeat before coincidence begins to look like something else. If we find another example from the same source, that also only makes sense when we read it through truth and not belief, then the case for accident weakens. Would you say that is a fair measure? They had to agree. It was their own kind of reasoning. Yes, the woman said. That is fair. Good, the stranger said. Have you heard of Christ's dilemma? Blank looks. No, the woman said. The stranger spoke again from memory. Jesus said, for judgment I have come into this world, that those who do not see may see, and that those who see may be made blind. Let it sit. The claim is that his presence causes two things. Those who do not see are given sight, and those who think they see are shown they were blind. Can belief give sight? No, the woman said. Can belief take sight from someone who actually sees the truth? No, she said. More slowly this time. Then what are we looking at here? The stranger asked, is this not the same coincidence we saw earlier? A long pause. Yes, the woman said quietly. It appears to be, as you say. Then this statement, the stranger continued, that those who do not see may see, and that those who see may be made blind. Can it be powered by belief? No, someone said. Can it be powered by truth? No one answered, but the answer was in the silence. That is the same pattern occurring at least twice, the stranger said. A statement from the same source that only makes coherent sense when truth is the engine, not belief. The woman's arms, once crossed in authority, were now at her sides. But there is something else about this second example, he said, his voice softer. You have spent the last half-hour telling this man. He gestured to the believer that there is nothing behind the claim, that it is belief all the way down. Do you recognize what that position is? Inside the dilemma? The dilemma says that those who see will be made blind, meaning those who are certain they see clearly will be shown they were not seeing clearly at all. The believer could not articulate what he knew, but he was standing in the right place. And you could articulate everything. You were certain. He looked at the woman, and yet, in the last few minutes, something you did not see has become visible, and something you were certain about has become less certain. Those who do not see may see, and those who see may be made blind. That is not belief. That is what just happened. No one moved. The woman looked at the stranger, a newfound respect on her face. The man beside her cleared his throat. I need to think about this. It was the most accurate thing he'd said all day. The crowd slowly dispersed, needing time to digest. The woman was one of the last to leave. She gave the stranger a long look, then turned and walked away, not fleeing, but choosing not to remain. The believer stood by the fountain. How did you do that? He asked. They kept telling me it was all just belief. You used their own certainty against them. The stranger smiled a quiet smile. I did not use anything against them. I asked them to hold their own principle steady and follow it. It led where it led. Where did you learn that? The believer asked. I've read those passages so many times, and never saw them that way. Some things can only be seen from the inside, the stranger said. Thank you, the believer said. Truly, I was drowning out there. You were not drowning, the stranger replied. You were standing in the right place. You did not have the words, but the place was right. There is a difference. The believer felt a sense of recognition. He bent down, picked up a small stone, and tossed it into the fountain. "Will you be here again?" he asked. Turning around, the stranger was gone. The plaza was empty where he had stood. The believer looked around, but there was no sign of him. He stood alone, replaying the moment the silence changed, the moment the ground shifted. He knew that, when he told this story later, people might not believe him. Not about the argument, about the man.